simplifying your UPSC journey. Welcome to Akshar Manthan. Learn, reflect, conquer.
State is individual writ large. This axiom proposes that the internal character of the individual is mirrored in the architecture of the city. To understand why a society functions or fails, Plato argues we must look at the psychological composition of the people within it. Plato approached political philosophy as a problem of engineering. His objective in the Republic was to design a society based on absolute logic, specifically built to withstand the points where human institutions typically fail. To achieve that, he built his political mechanics on a foundation of metaphysics. He believed that no society could be governed effectively until its leaders could distinguish between what is truly real and what is merely a passing physical illusion. The Republic functions as a structural attempt to arrest political decay by manifesting unchanging truths into human society. It seeks to replace the unpredictable flux of history with a permanent, logical stasis. This pursuit of absolute stability was a response to collapse. Plato was born into an aristocratic Athenian family, while the city was bleeding itself dry. After 28 years of the Peloponnesian War, the Athenian Empire fell to Sparta. The defeat exposed a harsh ideological contrast. Athens was democratic, individualistic, and fractured. Sparta was militaristic, aggressively communitarian, and highly disciplined. The final break with his home city came in 399 BC, when the Athenian democracy executed his teacher, Socrates. To Plato, an electorate that voted to kill its wisest citizen proved that a political system based on popular opinion was inherently flawed. Socrates had famously described the public as ill, suggesting the state required a cure rather than a leader. Plato took this as a directive to find a model of government ruled by verifiable knowledge rather than the erratic shifts of the mob. Plato's rejection at Athens resulted in a model of a state derived from general logical principles, a blueprint designed to be immune to the corruption of individual interest. The central debate of Greek thought was a conflict between the Sophists and the Socratics. The Sophists were materialists, arguing that what is, money and power, should determine the law. Plato and the Socratics were idealists, insisting that the law should be shaped by what ought to be. To prove that the material world of politics is an illusion, Plato constructed the allegory of the cave. He asks us to imagine prisoners chained inside a dark den, staring at a blank wall. Behind them, a fire casts projected shadows of passing objects. Because the prisoners have never seen the actual objects, they mistake these shadows for reality. If a prisoner breaks those chains and climbs to the surface, the process is painful. Their eyes burn in the blinding sunlight. But eventually, they realize the sun illuminates the true nature of things, what Plato called the form of the good. That sunlight represents true knowledge. Because the journey out of the cave requires intense intellectual rigor, Plato assumed only a rare few would ever make it. By definition, he viewed the democratic majority as people left staring at shadows. This establishes a divide between awareness and understanding. The debates, elections, and struggles for wealth in the physical world are merely opinions about shadows. Absolute knowledge exists only outside the cave, in the realm of eternal forms. If everyday political reality is an illusion, Plato reached a singular conclusion. The only people qualified to design and rule the state are the philosophers who have looked directly at the sun. Having argued that absolute truth exists, Plato turns from the macro-reality of the universe to the micro-reality of human psychology. He introduces the concept of the tripartite soul. Every human mind is driven by three competing elements. There is reason, which seeks truth, courage, which seeks honor and defends the body, and appetite, which desires physical pleasures like food, wealth, and comfort. To explain how these traits are distributed, Plato uses the myth of metals. He proposes that people are born with different dominant characteristics in their souls: gold for those ruled by reason, silver for those driven by courage, and bronze for those dominated by appetite. This internal hierarchy leads directly to Plato's definition of individual justice. A person is just only when reason exercises total dominance, using courage to discipline and suppress the appetites. A just human being is not defined by their outward actions, but by this precise internal architecture, where each element of the soul performs its function without interfering with the others. If the state is the individual writ large, then the structure of the soul dictates the architecture of society. The state must scale up this psychological division, splitting the population into 3 corresponding classes. At the top are the Philosopher Kings, the gold class acting as the reason of the state. Below them are the guardians and soldiers, the silver class providing the courage. At the base are the producers, the farmers, artisans, and merchants, making up the bronze class driven by appetite. Platonic justice at the societal level demands absolute functional specialization. The rulers must rule, the soldiers must fight, and the producers must produce. If one class interferes with the duties of another, for instance, a producer trying to run the government, the state descends into chaos. Determining who belongs in which class requires a sorting mechanism free from nepotism. Plato's solution is a 50-year state-sponsored education system that builds character while relentlessly testing aptitude. For the first 20 years, children receive a foundation in gymnastics, music, and basic military training. At age 20, they face a severe aptitude test. Those who fail join the bronze producer class. Those who pass continue their education, facing another call shortly after to separate out the true guardians. The survivors enter a 3-decade crucible of higher education. From age 20 to 50, they are immersed in mathematics, logic, and philosophy. The objective is to train their minds to leave the cave and comprehend the eternal forms. This filter was a meritocracy that even explicitly included women, reasoning that the soul has no gender. The apparatus exists to extract rational talent for leadership, while assigning all others to their structurally appropriate lower tiers. But even a 50-year education cannot override basic human biology. How does the state guarantee that these gold and silver classes will not eventually succumb to greed, using their intellect to hoard wealth? Plato recognized that material temptation destroys political integrity. To maintain the system, he introduced the communism of property and family. For the ruling classes, private wealth is abolished. They are forbidden from owning houses, land, gold, or silver. They must live together in state-managed barracks and eat their meals in a common mess hall. The stripping of individuality extends to the nuclear family. Plato argued that emotional attachments to spouses and offspring generate selfish tendencies, turn leaders into factionalists, and fracture their devotion to the state. The traditional family is replaced by a regulated system of eugenics. The state controls temporary mating schedules to produce optimal offspring. Upon birth, children are immediately taken by state officers and raised collectively in nurseries, ensuring no parent ever knows their biological child. This differs from modern Marxist communism. Marx sought an economic solution to liberate the working masses. Plato's communism is a political solution imposed strictly on the elite. The bronze producers are still allowed to own property and marry as they please. By denying the guardians any economic motive or familial loyalty, their personal survival becomes dependent on the survival of the city. Their private interests merge with the public good. To achieve true justice, the rulers must be stripped of all material distractions. The individual's humanity is subordinated to the organic, structural harmony of the state. This chain of logical deductions converges on a single apex, the establishment of the absolute dictator, the Philosopher King. Plato argues that if a ruler possesses the objective science of government, limiting them with laws is irrational. It would be like forcing a master physician to ignore a patient's symptoms because they have to follow a standard medical textbook. Because the Philosopher King understands the eternal form of the good, they operate with unbridled authority. Their primary directive is administrative. They must not alter the Constitution. They exist to maintain the exact, unchanging structural blueprint of the society. This leads to the ultimate Platonic paradox. The Philosopher King is uniquely qualified to wield power precisely because they do not want it. They would rather remain in the sunlight, contemplating the realm of ideas, but they sacrifice that personal happiness out of duty to the state. By engineering this stasis, Plato solves the problem of corruption that plagued Athens, but the cost is total. Every ounce of democratic freedom and individual agency is sacrificed for the sake of absolute stability. A blueprint built on strict authoritarian control immediately attracts fire, and the pushback against the Republic began almost the moment it was written. Plato's student, Aristotle, led the charge. Aristotle determined that erasing the family destroys a natural, time-tested institution necessary for basic emotional stability. Aristotle's objection was grounded in pragmatism. He recognized that forcing extreme unity through homogenization does not strengthen a society. It stunts the development of the individual and ultimately impoverishes the state. In the 20th century, the criticism became much more severe. In his book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, philosopher Karl Popper launched a critique that remains central to modern political thought. Popper accused Plato of giving birth to totalitarianism. By demanding the arrest of all political change and enforcing a rigid, inescapable class hierarchy justified by a myth, Plato built the intellectual foundation for the fascist state. Popper argued that a healthy, open society relies on piecemeal social engineering, making gradual, observable improvements. Plato, on the other hand, demanded a top-down revolution based on a theoretical ideal. We are left with a contradiction. Plato provided a framework for gender equality, recognizing that women suffer no natural disability in intelligence or governance. Yet he housed that equality inside an authoritarian cage that stripped every citizen of their agency. You can view him as a political idealist striving for perfect justice, or as the ancient architect of the police state. But as the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead famously observed, the safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato.